For years, you've probably heard that your health is determined by what you eat and how much you move, and that your mindset, your outlook on life, that's just nice to have, a bonus. But what if I told you that the science now shows your level of optimism might be just as powerful a predictor of how long you live as your cholesterol levels? Welcome to Longevity Lab. I'm Claire.
And I'm Robert. Claire? Wait, you're telling me that just being more positive could actually extend my life? Because I've always thought of optimism as sort of a personality trait. You either have it or you don't. And honestly, I've never really considered myself a glass half full kind of guy.
And that's exactly the misconception we're tackling today, Robert. The idea that optimism is some fixed, innate characteristic. You're born optimistic or you're not. It's one of the biggest myths in health psychology, and it matters because this belief actually stops people from doing something that could measurably improve their health outcomes.
Okay, so I've been wrong about this my whole life. That's a good start to the episode.
No, but this is actually perfect because your reaction is exactly why we're doing this episode. Most people, and I mean the vast majority, believe that optimism is just a personality thing. And when you believe that, you don't think it's something you can work on. But the research tells a completely different story. Optimism is trainable, it's a skill, and building it has measurable biological effects on your body.
Trainable? Like, I can actually practice being optimistic and it changes my biology?
Exactly, and the biological changes are not subtle. We're talking about measurable differences in stress hormones, inflammatory markers, immune function, and even the length of your telomeres, those protective caps on your chromosomes that are one of the key markers of biological aging.
Telomeres. Okay, I've heard you mention those before. The shorter they are, the more your cells have aged, right?
That's right. And here's the connection, and this is where it gets really fascinating. Studies have found that people with higher levels of optimism tend to have longer telomeres, even after controlling for things like diet, exercise, socioeconomic status. Which means optimism is doing something at the cellular level that's independent of all those other health behaviors we talk about.
So it's not just that optimistic people eat better and exercise more, though they might, but there's something else going on biologically.
There is, and that's what we're going to unpack today. The mechanism, the research, and most importantly, what you can actually do about it. Because here's what I want every listener to understand by the end of this episode. So, Sturd, your psychological well-being isn't separate from your physical health. It I as health. And the science now gives us very specific, practical ways to strengthen it.
All right, I'm genuinely curious now. Let's get into it. What does the research actually show?
Let's start with one of the most striking findings. There was a major study published in 2017 in the American Journal of Epidemiology that followed over 70,000 women for 8 years. And what they found stopped a lot of researchers in their tracks. The women in the highest quartile of optimism, so the top 25% in terms of optimistic outlook, had a nearly 30% lower risk of dying from heart disease compared to women in the lowest quartile.
30%? That's not a small effect.
It's not. And it's not just heart disease. Another large analysis, this one published in 2019 in JAMA Network Open, looked at data from over 200,000 people and found that higher optimism was associated with a 35% lower risk of dying from cardiovascular events. 35%, Robert, that's the kind of effect size we usually see with pharmaceutical interventions, not psychological ones.
Wait, 35%? That's almost unbelievable. Are we sure this isn't just, I don't know, optimistic people also happen to have better health care or something?
That's exactly the right question to ask, and the researchers asked it too. They controlled for a huge range of confounding factors: socioeconomic status, education level, baseline health conditions, depression, smoking, alcohol consumption, diet quality, physical activity levels. And the association held. Even after adjusting for all of those variables, Optimism independently predicted lower mortality risk.
So it's really doing something on its own.
It really is, and let me give you the mechanism because this is where the how becomes clear. When you experience chronic stress, and we all do, life is stressful, your body activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis. This triggers the release of cortisol, which in the short term is adaptive. Cortisol helps you respond to immediate threats, but when cortisol stays elevated over months and years, it becomes damaging.
Right. Chronic stress. We've talked about this before. It wears down your body.
Exactly. Chronic cortisol elevation promotes inflammation, contributes to insulin resistance, increases blood pressure, and accelerates the shortening of those telomeres we mentioned earlier. Now, here's where optimism comes in. Research shows that people with higher optimism tend to have a more adaptive stress response. They still experience stress, they're not living in a fantasy world, but their cortisol levels recover more quickly after a stressful event. They show lower baseline levels of inflammatory markers like C reactive protein and interleukin 6.
So it's not that optimistic people don't have problems. They just, their bodies handle the stress differently.
That's exactly it. And part of this is about how optimistic people interpret stressful events. Optimism isn't about denying reality or pretending everything is fine. It's about how you explain adversity to yourself. An optimist tends to see setbacks as temporary, specific to that situation, and not entirely their fault. A pessimist tends to see setbacks as permanent, pervasive across all areas of life, and entirely personal.
Okay, that distinction is actually really helpful. So if I lose my job, an optimist might think, this is a tough moment, but it's temporary. I'll find something new. The economy is rough right now, so it's not all about me. And a pessimist would think, I'm a failure. I'll never find work again. Everything in my life is falling apart.
That's a perfect example. And when you consistently interpret events through that pessimistic lens, your body's stress response stays activated. You're essentially bathing your cells in stress hormones for longer periods. Over decades, that cumulative effect shows up in your cardiovascular system, your immune function, and your cellular aging.
This explains so much. I have a friend, he's in his 70s now, always been what I'd call a realist. But honestly, he's pretty negative about everything. Every minor setback becomes this huge catastrophe, and his health has really declined in the last decade. I always thought it was just bad luck or genetics. But you're saying his mindset might actually be part of the biological process.
I want to be careful here, Robert. We can never say one person's health outcome was caused by their mindset. Individual health trajectories are incredibly complex. Genetics, environment, access to healthcare, life circumstances all play enormous roles. What the research shows us is population level patterns, and those patterns are clear. Higher optimism is associated with better health outcomes, on average across large groups of people. But for any one individual, we can't draw that direct causal line. That said, the biological mechanisms we've uncovered, cortisol, inflammation, telomere shortening, those are real pathways through which chronic pessimism could contribute to poorer health.
That's a fair caveat. I appreciate that nuance. So let me ask the obvious next question. If someone like me isn't naturally optimistic, can I actually change that? You said it's trainable.
Yes, and this is the part that I find genuinely exciting. because it changes the whole conversation from some people are just lucky to be optimistic to this is a skill anyone can develop. There's a specific exercise that's been studied extensively in randomized controlled trials. It's called the best possible self exercise. And I want to walk through exactly how it works.
Best possible self. Okay, tell me more.
The exercise was developed by researchers in positive psychology, and it's deceptively simple. You set aside about 15 minutes. You find a quiet space, and you write continuously for those 15 minutes about your best possible self in the future, say 5 or 10 years from now. You imagine that everything has gone as well as it possibly could. You've worked hard, you've made good choices, and you've achieved the things that matter most to you across different areas of your life. Your relationships, your health, your work or creative pursuits, your personal growth.
So it's not just wishful thinking, it's a structured writing exercise.
It's structured writing, and that structure matters. You're not just listing things you want. You're vividly imagining and describing a future where you've become the person you hope to be. You write in the present tense, as if it's already happening. You include sensory details. What does your day look like? Who are you spending time with? What does it feel like to wake up in that life?
And this actually changes your biology.
It does. Multiple studies have found that people who do this exercise, even just 3 or 4 sessions over a couple of weeks, show measurable increases in optimism and positive affect. They also show decreases in negative affect. And the effects aren't just subjective. Some studies have found that this exercise reduces cortisol levels and improves immune function markers.
Wait, so you write about a positive future for 15 minutes and your stress hormones actually go down. That seems almost too simple.
It does, doesn't it? But think about what's happening in your brain during this exercise. You're activating the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain involved in planning, imagination, and goal-directed thinking. You're creating a vivid mental image of a positive future, which your brain processes in some ways similarly to a real experience. You're essentially training your brain to access and elaborate on positive possibilities, strengthening those neural pathways. And when those pathways are stronger, your default interpretation of ambiguous events starts to shift. A neutral email from your boss becomes they probably need my input on something rather than I'm about to get fired.
So it's like weight training for the optimism muscle.
That's exactly the analogy I use with my clients. You're not going to bench press 200 pounds on your first day. But if you consistently train over time, you build strength. Same thing with optimism. You're not going to suddenly become a relentless optimist after one 15-minute writing session. But if you do this exercise, say, once a week for a couple of months, you're strengthening the neural circuits that support optimistic thinking.
And there's published research backing this up.
There is. A 2018 meta-analysis published in the Journal of Positive Psychology reviewed 29 studies on the best possible self-exercise and found that it reliably increased optimism and positive affect, with small to moderate effect sizes. Those are real, measurable changes, and notably the effects were stronger when people wrote about multiple life domains rather than just one, so covering relationships, health, work, and personal growth all in one session.
Okay, so I'm thinking about this practically. If I wanted to try this, and I think I do, walk me through exactly what I do, let's say tomorrow morning.
All right, here's the protocol based on the research. Set aside 15 minutes. Find a quiet space where you won't be interrupted. Have a pen and paper, or you can type. The research suggests to both work. Start with this prompt, which I'll also put in the show notes. Think about your life in the future, 5 to 10 years from now. Imagine that everything has gone as well as it possibly could. You have worked hard and succeeded at accomplishing all of your life goals. Think of this as the realization of your life dreams. Now, write about what you imagined.
5 to 10 years. That's a long horizon. Would it still work for someone my age?
Absolutely. And actually, the research suggests it might be even more beneficial for older adults. There's a 2016 study in the journal Aging and Mental Health that found that older adults who engaged in future oriented positive imagery showed improvements in psychological well being that were comparable to younger adults. Your brain doesn't stop being capable of imagining positive futures as you age.
That's encouraging. So I'm writing for 15 minutes straight. What if I run out of things to say?
This is a common question, and the researchers have guidance for this. If you get stuck, shift to a different life domain. If you are writing about your relationships and you feel like you've covered it, move to your health. What does your body feel like in this best possible future? How's your energy? What activities are you doing? Then move to your personal growth. What have you learned? What skills have you developed? Then your contribution. What are you giving back? What matters to you?
And I'm writing in the present tense like it's happening now.
Present tense with specific details. Instead of I will be healthy, you'd write I wake up feeling energetic. I take a long walk in the morning and my legs feel strong. I'm able to play with my grandchildren without getting winded. The specificity and the sensory detail are what make it vivid to your brain. That vividness is part of what drives the neurobiological effect.
This actually sounds kind of enjoyable. I was expecting some complicated meditation protocol or something.
It is enjoyable. That's part of why it works. People actually want to do it. And the research shows that the positive emotion generated during the exercise is part of what drives the optimism increase. You're not just cognitively restructuring your thoughts, you're generating genuine positive emotion through imagination.
Now, you mentioned earlier that this connects to blue zones somehow, the places where people live the longest.
Yes, and I think the blue zone connection is really illuminating. When researchers studied Sardinia, one of the original blue zones, this is an island off the coast of Italy with an unusually high concentration of male centenarians, they found certain cultural patterns. These communities have strong social connections. They walk a lot. They eat a plant heavy diet. But there's also a psychological element. The researchers noted what they called a cultural optimism, a general outlook that life is good, that problems are solvable, that there's always something to look forward to.
Is that really measurable, or is it more of an observation?
It's more qualitative, but it's consistent across multiple blue zones. In Okinawa, they have the concept of ikigai, a reason for being, a sense of purpose that gets you out of bed in the morning. In Nicoya, Costa Rica, they have plan de vida, a life plan, a sense of direction. In Ikaria, Greece, they have a cultural pace of life that reduces chronic stress. None of these communities use the word optimism in the clinical sense, but they've built cultures that naturally cultivate what the research measures as optimism, the general expectation that good things will happen, that life has meaning, that challenges are manageable.
So it's not necessarily that every individual Sardinian is a relentless optimist. It's that the culture itself supports an optimistic worldview.
Exactly. And that's actually really important for how we think about applying this research. We're not asking anyone to become a forced, fake, positive person who denies real problems. That's not optimism, that's toxic positivity, and it's actually associated with worse health outcomes in some studies because it involves suppressing genuine emotions. Real optimism, the kind that's linked to longevity, is about how you process and respond to challenges, not about pretending challenges don't exist.
That distinction feels really important because I think a lot of people, myself included, hear be more optimistic and think it means pretend everything is fine. And that doesn't feel authentic.
It shouldn't feel authentic because it's not real. Optimism is about acknowledging the full reality of a difficult situation and then maintaining the belief that you can cope, that things can improve, that there are paths forward. It's not about denying the darkness, it's about believing in the possibility of light.
That I can work with, that feels real. So if someone's listening and they want to start building this skill, and they're, say, naturally a bit more on the skeptical or pessimistic side, where would you recommend they begin beyond the writing exercise?
Great question. So, the best possible self exercise is the most researched intervention, but there are other evidence based practices that support optimism. One is what's called three good things. At the end of each day, you write down three things that went well and why they went well. This trains your attention to notice positive events, which for many pessimists simply get filtered out of awareness.
I've heard of gratitude journaling. Is that the same thing?
It's similar but with an important nuance. Gratitude journaling is about appreciating what you have. The three good things exercise is slightly different. It's about noticing positive events and then specifically attributing causes to them. The why part is crucial because it builds what psychologists call an explanatory style that's more optimistic. You're training yourself to see that good things happen for reasons, often reasons related to your own actions or other people's kindness, rather than just being random luck.
So it's training the attribution part of your brain.
Exactly, and this connects directly to what we talked about earlier, the way optimists explain events. When something good happens, an optimist tends to attribute it to stable, global, and personal causes. I did well on that project because I'm capable and I prepared thoroughly. A pessimist tends to attribute it to temporary, specific, and external causes. I did well on that project because I got lucky this time. The three good things exercise directly practices the optimistic attribution style.
That's really practical. What about on the flip side, when bad things happen? Is there a way to practice processing those differently?
Yes, and this is harder work, but arguably even more impactful. There's a technique from cognitive behavioral therapy called cognitive restructuring or disputing negative thoughts. When you notice a pessimistic explanation forming, this always happens to me, I'm such a failure, everything is ruined. You pause and you ask yourself three questions. First, is this thought true? What's the actual evidence? Second, is there another way to look at this situation? What would someone I trust say about this? Third, even if there is some truth to my negative thought, what are the implications, really? Does this one event define my entire future?
So you're essentially questioning your own catastrophic thinking.
You're becoming your own skeptical investigator. And over time, this process becomes more automatic. Your brain starts generating those alternative explanations on its own without you having to consciously do the work each time. That's the neuroplasticity at work. You're literally rewiring your default thought patterns.
And this isn't just feel good advice, there's actual physiological change happening.
Let me give you the biological pathway in more detail, because I think knowing the mechanism makes it more motivating. When you engage in these practices consistently, several things happen. First, you reduce the baseline activity of your amygdala. That's the brain's threat detection center. Chronic pessimism keeps the amygdala on high alert, constantly scanning for problems. That means constant low-level activation of your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response.
So the pessimist's brain is essentially always a little bit in threat mode.
Yes, and that means cortisol is being released more frequently. Cortisol over time contributes to the accumulation of visceral fat. That's the dangerous fat around your organs. It promotes inflammation throughout your body. It damages the inner lining of your blood vessels, contributing to atherosclerosis. It impairs your immune system's ability to fight off infections and surveil for cancer cells.
So, chronic pessimism is basically chronic stress.
At the physiological level, that's exactly what it is. And chronic stress, as we know from decades of research, is one of the most powerful drivers of accelerated aging and disease. Optimism, on the other hand, dampens that stress response. It allows the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest branch, to activate more fully. That lowers blood pressure, reduces inflammation, supports immune function, and even promotes the activity of telomerase, the enzyme that helps maintain telomere length.
Telomerase. So, there's actually an enzyme that repairs those telomere caps you mentioned?
There is. Telomerase is an enzyme that adds DNA sequences to the ends of chromosomes, essentially rebuilding those protective caps. And here's what's fascinating. Some research suggests that psychological interventions, including mindfulness practices and possibly optimism training, are associated with increased telomerase activity. A 2018 study published in the journal Psychoneuroendocrinology found that participants who underwent a meditation retreat showed significant increases in telomerase activity compared to controls, and these increases were correlated with improvements in psychological well-being.
So, your thoughts are literally affecting the enzymes in your cells. That's profound, actually.
It really is. And I think it's one of the most important scientific insights of the last few decades. The mind body connection isn't metaphorical, it's not woo, it's specific biological pathways that we can now measure and understand.
Okay, so we've covered the science, the mechanisms, the exercises. Let's make this super practical for someone listening right now. Say someone wants to start today. What's the simplest, most evidence based first step?
I'd say start with the best possible self exercise. Do it once this week, just 15 minutes. Go in with the expectation that it might feel a little strange, a little forced at first. That's normal. The positive emotion often comes a few minutes in, once you really start imagining the details. And then if it resonates with you, do it again next week. The research suggests that doing this exercise once a week for 4 weeks produces measurable changes in optimism and well being.
Once a week for 4 weeks. That's very manageable.
It is. And I'd add one more practice that's even simpler: the 3 good things exercise I mentioned. Just 3 minutes at the end of each day. Write down 3 things that went well and why they went well. That's it. These two practices together, one forward looking, one backward looking, they complement each other and train different aspects of the optimism skill.
The forward looking one builds the ability to imagine positive futures. The backward looking one trains you to notice and correctly attribute positive events that are already happening.
Exactly. And together, they shift your whole orientation toward what researchers call a positivity bias, not a denial of negative reality, but a greater accessibility of positive interpretations and expectations. Your brain starts to default to what's possible rather than what's wrong.
Now, I have to ask, because I know someone listening is thinking this. What about the person who has clinical depression or anxiety? Is this advice still relevant, or is that a different conversation?
That's a really important question, Robert, and I want to be very clear about this. Clinical depression and anxiety disorders are medical conditions that require professional treatment. The exercises we're discussing today are not a replacement for therapy, medication, or professional mental health care. If someone is experiencing symptoms of depression, persistent low mood, loss of interest in activities, significant changes in sleep or appetite, thoughts of hopelessness or self harm, that absolutely needs to be addressed with a qualified mental health professional.
So this is more for the general population who might lean pessimistic but aren't dealing with clinical depression.
Exactly. And even for people with clinical depression, some of these techniques can be helpful as complementary practices, but they should be done in consultation with a therapist, not as a self directed treatment. The research on optimism interventions in clinical populations is still emerging, and it's not yet clear whether the effects are the same magnitude. So please, if you're struggling with your mental health, reach out to a professional. That's the most important step you can take.
I appreciate you making that distinction. It's important. All right, so let me try to summarize what I've learned today because my head is genuinely spinning a bit. Optimism isn't just a personality trait, it's a skill that affects your actual biology. Higher optimism is linked to lower inflammation, better stress recovery, longer telomeres, and a 30 to 35% lower risk of dying from heart disease. And you can build this skill through specific exercises like Best Possible Self and 3 Good Things. Did I get that right?
You got it. And I want to add one more layer to this that I think is really important. The research suggests that optimism doesn't just protect health directly through those biological pathways, it also leads to healthier behaviors. Optimistic people are more likely to exercise, eat well, follow medical advice, and engage in preventive health behaviors. Not because they're somehow morally superior, but because they believe that their actions matter. They believe that the future can be influenced by what they do today.
So it's a virtuous cycle. Optimism leads to healthier behaviors, which leads to better health, which reinforces optimism.
That's exactly the pattern. And conversely, pessimism can create a vicious cycle. If you believe nothing you do matters, why would you bother exercising? Why would you go to the doctor? Why would you quit smoking? The belief that your actions are futile becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's actually really motivating because it means the first step isn't be optimistic. It's do one small thing that might shift your outlook even slightly, and then that shift makes the healthy behaviors easier.
Yes. And this is why the research on optimism is so empowering. It's not saying some people are just lucky to be optimistic and healthy. It's saying optimism is a set of cognitive and emotional skills that can be developed, and developing them has measurable health benefits.
So, what's the one thing you want listeners to take away from today's episode? The sentence they can hold on to.
Today's rule: your mindset is a biological variable, and you can train it. Spend 15 minutes this week writing about your best possible future self. The science shows it measurably shifts your biology toward health and longevity.
That is a rule I can actually follow. And I'll be honest, I came into this episode skeptical. I really did think optimism was something you were born with or not. The idea that I could actually change my outlook and that doing so would change my health, that's genuinely new to me. So this week, I'm going to do the best possible self exercise. I'm actually looking forward to it.
I love that. And for our listeners, we love to hear from you. What surprised you most about the connection between mindset and physical health? And if you decide to try one of these exercises, let us know how it goes. We're building a community of people who are serious about evidence-based health and longevity, and we learn so much from your experiences.
And if you found this episode valuable, please subscribe to Longevity Lab and hit the bell. We release a new episode every single day, each one unpacking a different piece of the longevity puzzle, always grounded in real research, never just wellness hype.
And of course, a quick reminder: everything we've discussed today is for educational purposes only. If you have existing health conditions or concerns, please consult with your doctor before making any changes to your health routine. This is especially true for mental health. If you're struggling, professional support is available and effective.
Thanks for spending this time with us. Until tomorrow, stay curious, stay evidence-based, and remember, your mind and your body are not separate. They're one system. Train both.
See you next time on Longevity Lab.